The year was 2004. I was 10 years old and had just gotten my PS2 when a little game was introduced to me that just stole my heart. A game because of which I haven't thought about video games the same way since. There's a reason why Final Fantasy X has held its place as one of my 2 all-time favorite games after all of these years. Or, actually no, scratch that. There are hundreds of reasons. I love the world of Spira so much. I love this cast of characters. I love the celebration of love in all its forms: familial, platonic, romantic, electric, phantonic. I love the quietness with which this game grieves, the audacity with which it screams, explodes. I adore how every set piece and encounter with its kaiju antagonist Sin feels like an event. How the game makes me fear that any NPC I befriend can die at any given moment because of the desperation of it all, a desperation that I feel in combat. This world isn't safe. It worships its gods from a place of dread. And that's the same dread that I feel when I hear its name. Sin. The great beast my party and I are out to slay. Except, that's not it, is it? The story of Final Fantasy X isn't framed as a quest, but as a pilgrimage, a religious outing rooted in historic culture and tradition. A summoner makes the journey across Spira to pray at its great temples and collect each temple's aeons, massive beasts of battle meant to aid them in the fight against Sin. They're also accompanied by a band of guardians, and together they journey to the ancient city of Zanarkand to acquire the final aeon. But the tricky thing is, it is a cyclical tradition. See, when a summoner uses the final aeon to vanquish Sin, the ensuing period of peace Spira calls the Calm lasts only temporarily. Sin is resurrected every few years, and Spira believes it's as a necessary, if unfortunate, punishment for its own sins, its own failings towards the teachings of Yevon. When Sin resurfaces, new summoners must begin their pilgrimages anew. Although, of course, only one will face Sin in the end. Rinse, repeat, recycle.
Sin is an inevitable part of Spira's destiny. It is never-ending.
This cannot be! The teachings state that we can exorcise sin with complete atonement! It's been our only hope all these years!
Hope is comforting. It allows us to accept fate, however tragic it might be.
No! Where is the sense in all this?
I didn't quite know what I was in for when I reached the end of FF10. It was a story about breaking the cycle, about making a choice that would alter the course of history for Spira forever. Together, Yuna, our heroine and resident summoner, and her guardians make the choice to save Spira without using the final summoning, when they learn the horrifying truth behind what it entails.
You must choose the one whom I will change, to become the Faith.
No one. I would have gladly died. I live for the people of Spira, and would have gladly died for them, but no more. The final summoning is a false tradition that should be thrown away.
In doing so, she and the cast of FF10 break a storytelling cycle as well. The lionization of self-sacrifice, the romanticization of martyrdom, the dehumanization inherent in expecting a person, a human being, their friends, to throw their lives away for a cause that will see them remembered more as myth and legend than as people.
My father wanted to make Spira's sorrow go away, not just cover it up with lies.
People with real lives, real beliefs, real relationships. It's a theme that's being challenged and problematized more and more in recent years, to varying degrees of success. But I kinda love it. Even as a kid, I loved seeing it. Yuna and her friend's final battle with Sin still comes at a cost, of course, but we'll put a pin in that for now, because that's not what this video is about. What you need to understand is that I loved FF10. I loved Spira, this fantastical world that reflected, was inspired by, aspects of South Asian culture I grew up with. Far more than Eurocentric medieval fantasy, which I also loved, mind you, ever would. I tore my way through FF10 and then I tore through it again. It was the first game I bought twice, once its US release and once the international. Years later, I bought it again on PS3 and eventually again on PS4. Hell, I glued my eyes to the screen watching my younger brother become enchanted by it on his Nintendo Switch. For a person who rarely replays games, I played FF10 way too many times to count. But the tricky thing is, the same thing didn't happen with its sequel. And that's the focus of this video. Final Fantasy X-2. I imagine my response to FF10-2 might have been different, but I gotten past Chapter 2 all of those years ago. But the truth of it is, I didn't finish the thing until almost 2 decades later. I returned to a Spira that I had abandoned, and one that had abandoned its old ways. A Spira that was now reveling in its eternal calm, a home safe from sin. I returned to a story far smaller and lower stakes than that of FF10's, and yet one that meant everything to me, and everything to Yuna. I took on this quest to save someone I cared for, and there came a moment when I remembered that I cared for this world too, and that I'd forever be haunted by the ghost of what it had once been. It was this. My return to Zanarkand, where the first game's chilling opening takes place. I walked up to the top of the hill and just stood there for a while, basking in it all. This isn't the Spira that I remember, but it is a Spira I want to rediscover and be enchanted by all over again. So, listen to my story. This may be our last chance.
You know, I keep telling everybody they should move on and grow. Some do. But not us.
FF10-2 is about a present that is haunted by its past and paralyzed by its future. With sin removed from the equation, the people of Spira are scrambling to define what their new world order might look like. Do you relearn, revitalize, try to recontextualize the religion that lied to you? Or do you set aside the old ways and try to brute force your way towards revolution and change?
All I want's some peace and quiet.
Poor thing. She's led such a sheltered life.
Maybe she's getting old.
Who's getting old?
As might be natural when the politics of your world are altered, we see big changes in the individuals of Spira too. Former summoner Isaru has become an entertainer and a cynical capitalist, selling out the holy lands of Zanarkand he once admired as a hot new tourist destination.
And remember, the ruins of Zanarkand will be waiting.
Shalinda, a former devotee of Yevon, has stepped away from the temples to pursue a career in journalism and TV broadcasting. And of course, our hero Yuna has gone from being a quiet, patient, and dutiful summoner to a gun-toting, sphere-hunting member of the Gullwings on the trail of treasure, with a side interest in song and dance. At first glance, you see it in her change of costume. Gone are the modest skirt and kimono-esque sleeves. Gone is her magic staff, traded in for a pair of pistols. Her top is more revealing, the way she carries herself more confident and grown up. And on closer inspection, you see the why of it all. In the wake of all she's learned, all she's seen, all she's lost, Yuna is a fundamentally different person. And I think that's my cue to address the shoe-buff in the room. Like the world of Spira around her, Yuna is struggling to move on. She's cut her hair a little bit shorter. She's speaking up and being more assertive. When you switch to her warrior dress sphere, she is wielding a sword that is all too familiar to anyone who's played the original FF10. Yuna is taking on the qualities of someone she's grieving, someone who showed her what a fundamentally different world might look like, someone she loved, someone you loved. Do you want to know why I finally played FFX2? It's because the longer I've spent away from it, the more it's felt necessary. Like an addendum to the core themes of FF10 that adds to the loss, the grief, the hope in spite of it all. The last step in its subversion of heroic sacrifice, an opportunity to bring back the hero I spent so many hours playing as. Let me explain. While the original FF10 follows Yuna's pilgrimage, it revolves primarily around Tidus. And yes, I'm pronouncing it incorrectly on purpose. They let me name him, so I'm allowed to mispronounce him. Anyway, Tidus is the original FF10's fish out of water and audience surrogate, dragged to Spira from another world by Sin. It's through his eyes that we first become acquainted with this world.
I got too, close to Sin, and my head's all foggy-like. So, I don't know where this place is, or even where I came from.
Sin's toxin got to ya.
But who is Tidus? Tidus? Whatever you chose to name him? Well, he's a star blitzball player, brought to Spira from a distant past. Another Xanarkand, to be precise. When he learns that his home city is now a ruined and sacred place, the last destination for all summoners, he has to see it for himself. He joins Summoner Yuna and her guardians at the start of her pilgrimage for selfish reasons, alongside Yuna's friends and surrogate family, Waka, Lulu, and Kimari. And it's his relationship with Yuna that's at the heart of the game. One of the first love stories I truly connected with. He shows her how to be more carefree and inspires her with his directness and vulnerability. Tidus is described repeatedly through FF10 as a crybaby, and he is, and it's awesome? In hindsight, I can't begin to describe how much it means to see characters like that represented in the medium. A male hero who is both athletic and emotionally vulnerable, naive and yet willing to challenge the status quo.
If you want everything, you'll end up with nothing.
But I want everything!
Tidus shows Yuna a vision of Spira in which she can allow herself to be more selfish. To take care of herself first. And that's important. Yuna has grown up with the weight of her world on her shoulders. The expectation of all around her that she will follow in her father's footsteps as the next summoner to defeat Sin. In turn, Yuna and the party show Tidus what it means to fight and care for something larger than yourself. Admittedly, a common arc for these games, but one I cheer for every time. The fashion, geography, and architecture of Spira were primarily inspired by places like Japan, Thailand, the Caribbean, and the South Pacific, but rather than commit to them as separate aesthetics, Square fused and synthesized them in unique ways. That's why the world stands out so much. This was confirmed by the character designer and currently overworked Knight of All Trades, Tetsuya Nomura. I won't talk too much about the aesthetics beyond my surface level understanding, but Thor High Heels has an excellent video on this if you're hungry for more details. What I will say is that my family liked to travel, and we especially frequented Thailand. So even back then, much of FF10's Buddhist iconography and coastal towns felt familiar to me. But while I could appreciate the mise-en-scène from a place of tourism or cultural osmosis, the thing that really hit home for me was Spira's culture. Colorful, beautiful, and yet problematic.
It must be tough, being a summoner.
Yuna chose her own path. She knew from the beginning what it meant.
I grew up in Bangladesh, a South Asian country you might be familiar with because sitcoms find the word funny.
Actually, I'm from Bangladesh.
There's no new Bangladesh. There's just Bangladesh.
But here's a couple of other reasons to know my home. Bangladesh is home to the world's longest natural sea beach in Cox's Bazar. Parades and processions of giant masks line the streets on Bengali New Year, in a tradition meant to celebrate unity and the banishment of evil. Its capital, Dhaka, where I grew up, boasts a popular cricket stadium to which I've only been twice because I don't understand sports. But most people go crazy for. The second time I went was on the opening ceremony for the 2011 Cricket World Cup, when the stadium was blasted with lights to ring in the grand event, complete with a concert feat Bryan Adams. I remember the electric energy of it all, the pride we collectively felt as a nation that Dhaka would be hosting this event this year. And dazzled by the lights, I couldn't help but think of Lucas Stadium, Spira's own cultural center, its massive blitzball stadium where I'd also seen bombastic sports games and dazzling concerts. Sports in Final Fantasy X bring people together. It unites them from across borders. In the US, it's most prevalent between states, within the country, because of sheer size and scale. Events in baseball, basketball, and American football typically draw in crowds on the national level. In Bangladesh, the interest is in international competition. India, Sri Lanka, Australia. Who's your second choice if our team can't make it? Who's your third? Okay, why am I going off on a tangent about all of this? Well, unlike the West, Bangladesh, or many of the places Nomura cites as influences, are home to a collectivist culture rather than individualist. There's a greater emphasis on duty to your community and to your family, a double-edged sword that can be warm and wonderful and incredibly kind at best, but also impractical and toxic at worst.
He asked me to marry him.
Hey!
As with any culture, it's not all fun and games. It differs by family, of course, but in general, there are expectations in place around how you practice religion, the kinds of jobs that are acceptable, who you can or should marry, and what you as a person, as a woman, are expected to sacrifice because of where you come from.
Sometimes marriage doesn't require love, you know? Defeat sin and bring joy to the people of Spira. Get married and bring joy to the people of Spira. For Yuna, they're just two ways down the same road.
I understood Spira's ghosts just as well as I did its celebrations. Understood why certain characters made choices that fans unfamiliar with Eastern culture and religions might have raised eyebrows at. That's what made Titus such an effective audience surrogate. At a time when I was starting to question which rules I agreed with and which I didn't, Titus's stubbornness and vulnerability, Yuna's rediscovery of her purpose, Oren's courage in the face of the politics that had wronged him, and FF10 itself pushed me towards critical thinking before even high school or college could. And while it's not perfect, no game is, I find that even all these years later, it mostly holds up. And it does so with nuance. I loved how Titus came at so many of these problems from a place of empathy. FF10 goes to great lengths to make sure you understand why its characters are the way they are.
Think of this as an opportunity to learn more about the Al-Bhed.
Let him go.
You meme the hell out of Waka for being prejudiced against the Al-Bhed, but you don't hate him for it. You understand he blames them for his brother's death, and he grows to understand why he shouldn't. The sequel even has this little scene where he's learned to speak Al-Bhed. It's great.
Drigui!
Huh?
You understand why Riku and the others keep the truth about Yuna's fate from Titus, because it's all just so much and their bond is the rare thing that lets her be happy. You understand why the people are so slavishly devoted to their maesters, not even willing to entertain the possibility that there might be corruption among their ranks. And on the flip side, you understand why an arranged marriage between Yuna and Seymour might make sense from a cultural standpoint, because that kind of expectation is ingrained in you and it is the kind of problematic shit that is hard and paralyzing to unlearn. But damn it all to sin, if that scene of them riding in to stop it isn't the best wedding crash since Shrek? Man. That's why, by the time you reach Xanarkand, the truth behind the final summoning hits that much harder. The party learns that the ritual demands the life sacrifice of not just the summoner, but of one of their closest guardians too. A guardian who must give their life to be reincarnated as the next Sin. Although Yuna had made her pilgrimage prepared to give up her life, being faced with the prospect of having to give up someone else's prompts her to defy the teachings and to break the cycle. To seek an alternative way to stop sin. She makes a choice not to martyr herself for false hope. So, what's plan B? Plan B hinges on the unification of Spira, of spreading a message around the globe that asks everyone you've met along the way to band together to pray, to sing the hymn of the fate at the same time, a hymn that will draw out Sin just long enough for Yuna and the others to infiltrate him. There's more, of course, themes about parentage and intergenerational trauma, family honor, the nature of dreams, but I promised myself I wouldn't let this turn into a Final Fantasy X video. So, let's bring it back. If the climax of the first game sees Spira brought together, Final Fantasy X-2 sees it more splintered than ever. People aren't sure what to do in a world without Sin, a world without even the threat of Sin.
So, once we get Sin, the calm will come. Got anything exciting planned?
Hadn't really thought about it.
That sounds dull.
We see that two major factions have propped up following the dismantling of their organized religion, the Youth League and New Yevon.
The world is changing, and there are many who are finding it difficult to keep up. New Yevon wishes to help those who feel lost in the winds of change.
The Albed have even formed a miniature machine faction of their own. People are torn on where to go, agnostic even, except for their persistent belief in the arts. That's why Cid and Isaru can do to Zanarkand what they do. That's why there's this greater push towards hedonism. Don't let her new look fool you. Yuna's still a goody two-shoes who can't say no to helping anyone and everyone in need. But she's thriving in her new life as a sphere hunter. She's excited.
Hey, I know someone like that.
Oh, someone who goes around playing superhero, is it?
You mean brother?
Well, Riku, why don't we get going?
In her new life with the Gullwings, she is joined by Riku, her cousin and bona fide best friend from the first game, who has similarly updated her attire to be more revealing, but grown her hair out longer instead of shorter. And a new character, Pain. Pain is the buttercup of the group. She dresses in dark colors and is mysterious, sarcastic, and kinda rude, but her blossoming relationship with Yuna and Riku turned out to be one of my favorite things about the game. Costuming is key here. If you take issues with the default outfits in the game, I have good news for you. FF10-2 is absolutely unapologetic about fashion and its new all-female cast. Taking cues from magical girl manga and anime, 10-2 allows Yuna, Riku, and Pain, YRP for short, to swap between various outfits that grant different abilities at any point in combat.
Give me a Y! Give me an R!
Give me a break.
These outfits, called dress spheres, are modeled after different job classes from the larger FF series. Yuna's default is the gunner, Riku's the thief, and Pain's the warrior, but there is tremendous diversity in how the outfits manifest for each character. I've mentioned before that Yuna, in her warrior stance, pays homage to Tidus. Similarly, Riku's samurai costume pays tribute to their late mentor figure, Sir Auron. There's several more, but just one other you need to know about for the purposes of this video. The songstress. As a former summoner, Yuna has always been practiced in dance as per her duties with the ritual sending. Now, 2 years later, she picks up this dress sphere that allows her to put a J-pop flavor to her dance moves, and to sing for her friends and the people of Spira. This ties directly into both the game's stories and its themes, so let's talk about themes first. If Blitzball was the thing that brought Spira together in FF10, on the off-season, it's music that brings them together in 10-2. This is thematically consistent with what the end of FF10 sets up. Collective action through the Hymn of the Faith, through song, helped the people of Spira stop Sin. We see this in their respective opening scenes too. Both games open with bombastic celebrations at their respective Blitz stadiums. The first game kicks off with an intense Blitzball match starring Tidus, and the second is rung in with a concert starring a singer you assume to be Yuna. 10-2 makes it a point, however, to paint shared unity through these events as temporary, at least at first. Although Spira has turned to humanism and the arts in their time of crisis, the arts are struggling. We see this across the map. Money-making ventures like Tobli's concert struggle to get traction, while the musicians and sprites of Macalania Woods who perform, quote-unquote, art for art's sake, are fearful that they'll die soon with the woods.
The woods will soon be no more.
In fact, the only ventures that seem to have found success at the start of the game are Sid and Isaru's rebranding of Zanarkand as a tourism hotspot, Rin's replacement of the chocobos with automated machina, and a new board game called Sphere Break. The game frames these ventures as commercial first and meaningful second, as the bad kind of art. And because YRP sees them that way, we're expected to interpret them as such too. This art is fake, and it's ashamed of its past. What does it mean that this world you sought to spare from false hope only enjoys escapist hope? The kind removed from realness.
Perhaps one day, I'll find something more precious. But until that day comes, I want to protect this place.
That's why the fate of Macalania Woods feels so tragic. We see that there are two kinds of inhabitants here now, the musicians and the Guado, the latter of whom live in self-exile after the events of the first game. We learn that the magic of the woods is dying. With it, so are its sounds, its music.
Yes, it will be a brilliant finale for our doomed kind.
Doomed?
If only all the faith had stayed, the woods would never ever fade.
If you survey them from your airship, you'll sometimes get scenes like this. The musicians just lamenting, or saying their goodbyes into the camera. You get lines like swan songs like this.
The faith has gone, and we also must go to our end with the woods. Now we have but to wait for our time to come.
And as for their neighbors, the Guado, they've given up everything and are prepared to die with Macalania too. Spira, this land that once revered its past, has overcorrected. It's losing touch with its land and with its waters, and is grappling with a newfound move towards humanism that it hasn't figured out how to contextualize within its arts yet. Traveling through this eternal calm, that's what you're forced to bear witness to. The death of Spira's arts. Arts that have lost their ability to keep people together.
We cling to our secrets, our doubts, our memories. We're never able to put them aside. Even though they confuse us, there are some things we can only find in that confusion. I think it's okay to feel that way.
And while the rest of the world tries to move on too hard, too fast, Yuna finds herself trapped between extremes. Though her personality's changed, she still bears a deep reverence and respect for the ghosts of the past. Seeing what Zanarkand has become does, after all, bring up mixed feelings for her. Hell, her entire journey started with a sphere in which she and Riku think they've seen Titus. She's still convinced that she can find him after he faded away 2 years ago. Like Captain America in the aftermath of Thanos' snap, Yuna understands that moving on is not as straightforward as the people around her might make it seem. That there is a passivity and privilege in ignoring the past that she, on a personal level, isn't willing to afford.
You must stop! You want to get killed? We have no choice!
I would walk in on a place that held significance in the original FF10 story, and she would pause to reminisce in the same way I wanted to. My favorite instance of this is actually in Macalania. Throughout the game, you get the sense that the impending death of the woods is hard on Yuna, especially since she and Titus shared their first kiss there. And towards the end, when the Guado have left and you've even convinced the musicians to evacuate, YRP just stand there and grieve the silence of it all. That's when Pain says,
At least, we have our memories.
Yuna requests some privacy, which our newest Gullwing doesn't quite grasp, but like a true friend, Riku does, and promptly drags Pain away. And we get this moment.
I'm not ready to call this just a memory. Not yet.
The past means more to Yuna than just memories. And thematically, that's what music signifies in this game. A timeless, unwieldy thing, a bridge between the past and the present. I imagine that's what music means for a lot of us as well. When you're blasting your favorite OST, your favorite boss music, your favorite classic album, you remember what it was like to be 13, 16, 21 again. I remember being in the thick of it. Being on long bus rides between home and school, with good friends beside me and good music, and I remember what that music was. I remember sharing earbuds when there was a song we particularly connected with, and I remember keeping my favorites to myself, just for me. And I remember the first song that made me cry. I remember the most recent song to make me cry. That's what music means to me and has the potential to mean to so many others. But in the early chapters, Spira isn't quite there, is it? But then something happens. Halfway through the game, 3 key characters go missing. The leaders of Spira's new political factions. A trio of estranged friends by the names of Maven Nuge, Baralai, and Gipple. In their absence, Spira finds itself more at odds than ever. For all its ploys at violent revolution, this is a world that doesn't know what to do without leadership and guidance. And so, Yuna makes it her personal mission to stage a concert, one that will unite the people of Spira just as singing the Hymn of the Faith did 2 years ago.
When you fought Sin, everyone came together and sang the Hymn of the Faith, remember? I sang too. At the time, my friends were scattered and I was alone. But during the hymn, for just a little while, I felt connected again.
So, let's talk story then, shall we? I've mentioned before that the song Stress Dress Sphere is important. It's because it literally connects Yuna to a ghost of the past, manifesting her as the splitting image of an ancient, long-deceased summoner named Len, dressed in the same attire.
Who the heck is Len?
Len is kind of like a spiritual ancestor for our heroine, a summoner from 1,000 years in the past who also lost the man she loved during an era of war. And here's the kicker. Her lover, Shuyin, is revealed to be the man from the opening sphere.
You know, you're all I can count on to save Len.
Like Len with Yuna, Shuyin shares an uncanny resemblance with Titus. We learn that he died trying to save Len by hijacking an ancient giant mech called Vegnagun that is piloted via, you guessed it, music. Piano keys. And in the wake of his death, Shuyin became an unsent, a ghost unable to move on to the afterlife, a figure of literal haunting conjured from Spira's shameful past. But Shuyin is different from other unsent, possessing the power to, well, possess other living beings.
Stay back!
This is our story, Len.
Don't make me say this again! I'm not Len!
We see this full force during a powerful sequence in the Den of Woe, where he possesses Riku and Pain and uses them to fight Yuna. It's the one place in the story where Yuna is at her loneliest, and the track that plays here, overused as it is, hit me harder than at any other point in the game. In case it's not clear, Shuyin also acts as the game's antagonist, the ghost going around Spira, possessing different faith, bringing back dark versions of your old aeons.
There are places where fireflies cling to people's memories and make them eternal.
I wanted to rest forever, but the fireflies make me relive that moment. Again and again and again.
We learn he was also responsible for the violent tragedy that befell the Crimson Squad years ago, a squad that comprised of Nuge, Baralai, Gippo, and, would you believe it, our very own Pain herself. He possessed the heart of their group, Nuge, and threw him into conflict with his friends. He split them apart. Pain became the cold, distant person she is, at least until Yuna and Riku showed up, and Shuyin went on to pull strings from behind the scenes. eventually moving from Nuge to Baralai in his attempts to reawaken Vegnagun and avenge himself and Len. Avenge the name Spira wrote off as footnotes in its history. This is what I mean about FF10-2 being smaller in stakes than its predecessor. Instead of a kaiju, we have this. It's a different kind of gut punch, having to essentially face evil Titus. Midway through her concert, Yuna is swept away by her connection to Len, while the game blasts its big anthem. A love song aptly titled It's sung by Koda Kumi in the Japanese version and Jade Vilalan in the English, and it is absolutely gorgeous. A love song like a time capsule reaching out to Shuyin's ghost from Len's, and a love song like a letter, reaching out to Titus's memory through Yuna's. It's here that Yuna realizes what this all means to her. She resolves to save Shuyin by bringing Len's message to him, to quell his rage not with violence but with empathy.
I want to try talking to Shuyin. I have to tell him how Len felt. I'm sure he'll understand.
I think I can kind of understand how he felt. Trying so hard to save someone. 2 years ago, I was the same. Trying to find some way to save you.
So, yeah. If you thought FF10 was melodramatic, 10-2 cashes in all the chips on that front. And I know people like to rag on that kind of thing in JRPGs, but it's rarely been something that's bothered me. Again, I'm going to cite cultural differences. In Asia, and at least Bangladesh, this strange, arbitrary distinction between genre and literary doesn't quite exist in the same way as it does in Europe and the US. People just like to be entertained. We like big gestures, we like over-dramatization and emphasis on emotion over plot or character. And we like a dash of theater in our movies and TV. And that brand of raw emotion is what 10-2's climax boils down to. We track down Nuge and the others deep within the far plane, and that's when we get this legendary meme of a line.
I don't like your plan. It sucks.
Just like FF10's most mimetic moment, context changes everything here. The revelation that Nuge, this person, this former friend of Pain's, is gearing up to sacrifice himself doesn't sit right with Yuna. She's sacrificed too much herself, and she's still thinking about the events of 2 years ago. How could she not?
I gave in, I accepted, I believed. I allowed it to be true. We had no choice. Always we had no choice. Those are our magic words. We repeat them to ourselves again and again, but you know, the magic never worked. The only thing we're left with is regret.
Yuna, I'm sorry.
No. I don't want this anymore.
10-2 pushes the envelope on 10's themes about defying martyrdom and choosing to take care of yourself. About the limitations of great power equals great responsibility.
I don't want friends to die, or fade away. I don't want battles where we have to lose in order to win.
They found another way to stop Sin, right? They can find another way to stop Vegnagun. This is the moment FF10-2 bets everything on. How far are you willing to believe in the ideals set up by the first game? How hard are you willing to rip through the facade and fight for real hope, real change? Is a victory still a victory when it comes at so high of a price? Admittedly, it's not perfect as a critique. I find Yuna talking about the Aeons a little antithetical to the fact that they begged to be put down, and circumstances in FF10 kind of forced their hand because more people would have died. But it's still damn great as an addendum to the party's big decision in Zanarkand 2 years ago. Down in the far plane, she even hears words of advice, encouragement, even regret from those they've lost. Oren, Jekt, her own father, Braska.
Be strong, Yuna.
Yuna, don't falter now.
Don't let up! Keep fighting!
Stay focused.
At last, Spira will be cleansed.
You just don't get it, do you?
It's no good. He's not listening.
Shuyan, please stop this!
Following the obligatory final boss fight, featuring a Shuyan who fights almost identically to Titus, Len's spirit steps out from the songstress at last and helps her lover find peace.
Len?
Her last words to him.
Let's go. I have a new song for you.
She turns to Yuna. Thank you. The game's use of music as timelessness, as this thing that lives on in your bones as a source of tension and even intergenerational trauma, is quite special. Music in FF10-2 holds memory, but it also holds answers. It's the thing that brings the people of Spira hope again and helps them envision a clearer future. Chapter 5, which follows the concert, feels shorter than other chapters, because most of it is spent wrapping up previous story arcs by having you revisit different parts of Spira and seeing how much they've changed over the course of your newest adventure. Because of your newest adventure. Over time, you see Kimahri become the leader he's meant to be, and you come to discover these statues of him and Yuna sculpted atop Mount Gagazet. You see tensions between the Ronso and the Guado dissolve, and the Guado choosing to return from self-exile when Trommel redeems himself and takes leadership. You see the musicians and sprites of Makalania come home with them. Hell, even that sleazy merchant Owaka from the first game redeems himself, in a surprisingly moving story about honoring his family name. Then you see YRP agree to help Tobli with his concerts, which were underperforming early on but now go on to become huge successes at the Moonflow. And you see these wonderful moments of female friendship, shared between three women who flaunt their fashion, support each other, and hype each other up. Even Pain being the stickler with an attitude makes sense. This is a person who's only ever been, quote-unquote, one of the boys. Sarcasm and snark are her love language, and we get it.
You're a pain. -4 respect points, Riku.
Uh-oh, how many points left?
It's not all great, of course. I despise the way Brother is used in this game, and Sid's story feels a little undercooked. But then I catch up with Waka and Lulu having their newborn kid, and I'm proud. Characters I've cared for since as far back as 2004 are now all grown up. I mean, Waka, a dad? A whole story arc about him panicking over being a dad? Only to be reminded he'd already had experience as a surrogate parent to his late brother? The revelation that all Chapu had wanted out of him was brotherhood and companionship as himself? It's human and vulnerable as hell, and I was captivated by the ensuing scenes. Admittedly, I was caught off guard by how hard FF10-2 builds on the themes of the original. I hadn't expected it to be quite this forthcoming about it all, but that's melodrama, right?
It's quite absurd, really. I profess to seek Spira's true nature, and I do not even know my own.
For better and for worse, like a coked-up theater kid at a karaoke bar, 10-2 belts its themes at the top of its lungs and doesn't let up.
You obviously had some help.
I did, from my friends. My pilgrimage was successful because my friends and the Aeons supported me along the way. And they still do. Memories of the time we spent together make me strong. I won't stand here and let you call that strength useless.
I've talked about music as theme for a while now, and largely about 10-2's diegetic music, its use of music within the story. But I'd be remiss if I didn't drop a word or two about the non-diegetic. 10-2 reuses a lot of assets from the original. This is the same map of Spira with a few additions and subtractions. But remarkably, despite its insistence on reminiscence through song, it doesn't reuse the OST. In fact, legendary composer Nobuo Uematsu, who worked on FF10, didn't come back for the sequel. This time the charge is led by Noriko Matsueda and Takahito Eguchi, who were entrusted with infusing a more upbeat pop flavor into the new game world. All of 10-2's locations have new tracks to go with them, but the cool thing is, many of them are still scored in such a way that they feel melancholic, reflective, nostalgic anyway. Besaid and Xanarkand hit me especially hard in that regard.
It kicked.
Really? I want to feel.
The new style is also a great fit for the revamped combat. 10-2 shifts away from 10's fully turn-based system and back to the series' beloved ATB system, which makes for more exciting battles and more split-second decision-making. The camera is dynamic, pinballing around battlefields to follow the action while you deliberate over your next moves. And every now and then, the music will line up just perfectly in sync with your combos. It's extra as hell, I love it. And I love Uematsu's work, always will, but isn't it cool that this particular entry was headlined by a female composer? True to form, this magical girl, Charlie's Angels-inspired fever dream of a game ends on a high if you completed enough side quests.
You are the paragon of pastlessness.
You're wrong. Although I've wished to be stronger, and I've wanted to change, I realize that losing my past would mean losing myself.
With the help of Yuna's new rival, LeBlanc, and her goons, YRP defeats Shuyin and saves Spira once more. Nuj, Baralai, and Gippo, who act as powerful male parallels for our central trio, are all saved. And as they're leaving the far plane, Yuna hears... She encounters the remnant Faith, who asks her if she wants to see him again.
Him?
Yes. You want to walk together again?
Yes? Why is this even a choice, game? The Faith considers piecing him back together for memory and dreams, and then disappears. Okay. FF10-2 closes in a similar vein to how its predecessor did, with a speech addressing the people of Spira. But this time it's not Yuna who's delivering it. She's fulfilled her duty to the people and she's going home, with a weight worthy of Atlas lifted off her shoulders. And we get this line echoing Titus's own. This is my story. It'll be a good one. Headlining the speech in her place are Nuj and his friends united once more, calling for unification of Spira's factions. Unsurprisingly, this time the crowd erupts with applause. And after nearly 2 decades, I returned home to Besaid to find Titus waiting for me. Brought back and real. The raw emotion of the scene is so overclocked that the game doesn't really dwell on explaining how, or even why, but it means everything, and the thing that caught me off guard was how everyone shows up to be there. I loved seeing these two reunited, but the moment I knew for sure this was Titus, the Titus I knew, was when him and Waka yell over one another like bickering old friends. That is the moment. Seeing Riku and Pain hop down from the airship, the cheeky smile on Riku's face, the disbelief in Lulu's, that's the moment. And hearing Titus's words as Yuna pulls him across the waves and back to shore.
Huh? Hey! Whoa! You know, you've changed.
Well, you've missed a few things.
Yeah, Yuna, I had. I missed this a lot. Throughout this video, I've referred to this character as Titus, despite Square's insistence in their other games that I do otherwise. And to be clear, this was a deliberate choice, as was my decision to ignore the spin-off roguelike and the audio drama pseudo-sequel. Because for me, those entries missed the point of the original FF10. The truth of the matter is that this was a personal journey for me. Not one I undertook to save some guy named Titus, but one I took on to save Titus, as I'd known him, as I'd named him, as I'd mispronounced him in all of my conversations with friends and loved ones about this magical, arcane roller coaster behemoth of a game all the way back in 2004. As I'd lived in the shoes off for months on end at 10 years old, at 12, at 21. Lost to save files and memory cards that have been buried deep in the family archives, if not thrown out in some arbitrary session of spring cleaning. I've lost access to that iteration of that character now. But the fact that I got to name him, and picked the default name just to pronounce it wrong anyway, meant that I got to have an anchor to that version of the character that FF102 validated by refusing to say his name.
That sphere with you-know-who in it. Wasn't it recorded here?
Because that's the thing, isn't it? My journey was about a headcanon, an interpretation of events and themes that made sense to me.
Changed my mind. Outside the dream world, life can be harsh, even cruel. But it is life. He wanted you to have a shot at life.
I can't speak for anyone else's interpretation of this game, and FF102 gives you the tools to define that meaning for yourself. It's worth bringing up at this point that this game has multiple endings. The ending in which you resurrect Titus isn't easy or even intuitive. I think that's significant. There is a portion of the fanbase that argues this resolution cheapens the previous game's ending, and at this point, I could try to convince you that it actually lines up with the theme set up in Zanarkand, and with the recurring theme of shaping your own story, but to try to change your mind would be to miss the point. You have every right to experience FF102 as a story about moving on. All jokes aside, you have every right to say, it's better this way. How could I take that from you? I would never want anyone to take this from me. And this should go without saying, but similarly, I can't speak for an entire culture, and certainly not an entire hemisphere. I've talked at length about Eastern influences and the kinds of things I saw in FF10 Spira that resonated with me, but I'm sure there are cracks that I can't speak to. Bangladesh isn't even one of the Asian locales that inspired it. What I can say though is that I admired the design philosophy. After the steampunk, sci-fi, and/or medieval European settings of previous games, director Yoshinori Kitase and his team sought to recontextualize what the word fantasy could mean. And by turning to Japan itself, alongside a swath of underrepresented cultures as their influences, they created something truly special. The framing of this journey as a pilgrimage to Zanarkand, itself based on an Uzbek city and center of Islamic scholarship called Samarkand, was extremely striking to me as a Muslim kid, even one who didn't grasp the full context behind the inspiration just yet. And it gave a different kind of aura and worldliness to many of the series' staple summons too. Consider Yojimbo, who's named after the Japanese word for bodyguard and may be inspired by the Akira Kurosawa film of the same name. Shiva, who is named after a Hindu god, and Ifrit, whose name originates from Arabian and Islamic mythology. These are names Final Fantasy often draws from, but until FF10, the kinds of places they originate from weren't really spotlighted often. Things started to shift and diversify within the series after that point, but that would have to be a whole other video. I'll end on this note though. When you hear the word tropical, you often think of this. Beaches, jungles, wetland. FF10 shows that tropical can mean all of those things, but it can also mean this. A city like Lucca, like the city of Dhaka, Bangladesh, where I grew up, bustling and overcrowded with life, engaged in ample commerce, and bordered by nature. This looks more like my home to me than the glaring yellow filters of Extraction, a Hollywood film literally set in Dhaka, ever will. And again, I stress that if your story was different, that's okay. Representation matters, it does, but what Spira has to offer is so much more than that. While the way its people process grief, loss, trauma, art, and hope might be situated in a context that is precious to see, those themes themselves are universal. You get it. I get it. I don't think it's surprising that FF10 was wildly popular in the West and widely influential towards the genre, that it's become this legendary game within the canon. But here's the thing about canon. According to the Encyclopedia Britannica, the term canon, from a Hebrew-Greek word meaning cane or measuring rod, passed into Christian usage to mean norm or rule of faith. The Church Fathers of the 4th century CE first employed it in reference to the definitive, authoritative nature of the body of sacred scripture. The word is charged with religious meaning and authority. It's the very thing FF10 questioned in 2001, and the thing FF10-2 challenged again 2 years later.
Your plan is awful. Think about it. It's no different than what we did 2 years ago.
It's the thing one of the most requested remakes of all time, FF7 remake, challenged all these years later now that Final Fantasy itself is such a revered name in gaming canon. Shape your own story, decide your own canon. Is it any surprise that FF10-2 asks you to choose, over and over again, between tradition versus revolution? Between old versus young, old versus new? That it gives you this degree of agency over the story that its predecessor mostly pushed away from. It demands these answers of you. Do you preserve what Zanarkand stood for? Side with the Youth League versus New Yevon? Even in smaller side quests, do you side with the corporation run by old people or the alternative run by young blood? Do you save Tidus, or is it better to move on? From a development perspective too, note that Kitase, who directed the original FF10 in addition to classic titles FF6, 7, and 8, assumes the role of producer, and hands over the reins to Motomu Toriyama for his directorial debut. The same Toriyama who would go on to direct the FF13 trilogy and co-direct FF7R. But they don't stomp all over the past to make a point or anything. As mentioned before, they reuse assets, and they bring back their writing team, and they continue to develop your favorite characters from a place of empathy.
Kimahri think looking at road ahead better than looking back on things lost. Kimahri look at future. Ronso must look together without fear. Hey, sorry it took me so long to decide on a name, Lou.
It's all right. I knew it would be worth the wait. I had faith. Waka, we're in this together. Whether you see it or not, I really do rely on you.
Uni, you're changing. You want to change, and Pain's changed a whole bunch.
But, Riku, I have you to thank for that. If you hadn't invited me along, I might never have left Besaid. And the way I was before, I could never have lived like this.
FF10-2's changes to the world of Spira are radical because what has happened to Spira is radical. What happened to the series from here on out is radical too. Final Fantasy used to be, still is, an anthology. Every numbered game introduces you to a new world, new rules, new characters, but 10-2 was a direct sequel and a return to Spira. Perhaps my favorite quote about this game's new take on Spira comes from Masood House, a former features editor and staff writer at DualShockers. In his article Making a Case for Final Fantasy X-2, he writes, "In many ways this chaos was worse. At least Sin gave everyone a common enemy, one that rallied them together against a common foe regardless of beliefs. But the one thing 10-2 proved was that the same disunity that arose in modern-day Spira was the very same needless enmity that made factions go to war 1,000 years ago, eventually giving birth to Sin in the first place. So, how do you prevent another disaster like Sin? How indeed, right? Nuge, Baralai, and Kibble present vastly different answers through their respective factions. Nuge, the stoic hero, parallels pain and seeks to revolutionize Spira. Baralai, praetor of New Yevon, parallels Yuna and tries to take things slow as he's forced to think about what his old religion might mean in their new world. And Kipple, the spunky Albed, parallels Riku and ignores the squabbles of his former friends in favor of focusing his efforts on building Spira through innovation and automation. But YRP are different. They've been slaves to these systems before. In their found family and newfound freedom with the Gullwings, they have agency and choice. And it's that agency, that capacity for independence and choice, that spurs Yuna towards making an impossible choice and reuniting with an impossible reward. I think she's earned it.
This isn't how it was supposed to be. The eternal calm. I can feel it crumbling, falling away from beneath our feet.
I can't help but think of my countless replays of the original FF10 as its own cycle, a ritual pilgrimage that always ends bittersweet. I keep coming back, and with me so does Sin, and every time people die. Yuna dances, Titus grieves, Orin fades away, and the party makes a choice at Xanarkand that I couldn't make until all of these years later. They actualize what was once Spira's false hope and make it real. Finishing FF10-2 lifted a strange weight off my chest I didn't even know I had. It allowed me to make real the eternal calm I'd fought so many times and so hard for, and to challenge myself to improve it even further in the face of existential turmoil. Like Yuna, I've grown exhausted over the years of seeing bittersweet endings in which we win by losing. And while I'm not sure 10-2's response to that pattern is realistic, it wears its heart on its sleeveless arms so unabashedly that I can't help but respect the hell out of it. I can't help but tear up at this reunion 2 years in the making in real time, and 2 decades in my own. I mentioned earlier in this video the moment that I knew I was in for something special during my playthrough of FF10-2. Under a starry night sky, I stood atop that hill on Xanarkand and gazed out at the horizon, not quite sure what to expect in the wake of what I'd left behind the last time I'd been here. I didn't realize it then, of course, but this is also how my completionist run of the game ended. Yuna and Titus return to visit Xanarkand, and she steps back onto that hill. She stares out at the sunset on the horizon. Or is it a sunrise? I can't be sure. I just know that things look bright.
Thanks for playing!